They planned a bridal shower without the bride. They smiled, posed for photos, and toasted to a future that did not include me while I was still wearing the ring. But when I walked into the party they never wanted me at, his mother looked me dead in the eyes and said, "We already have a better bride." I did not cry. I smiled, turned around, and calmly went home, where I cancelled the entire wedding. They did not even find out from me, just a text from the caterer. That was the day I stopped being their silent puppet and became their biggest regret. My name is Claire Richardson. I am 28 years old, and until very recently, I was engaged to a man I thought I knew. His name is Nathan Grant. He is 31, charming, successful, and the kind of person who could win over a room with just one smile. For 3 years, I believed I was the luckiest woman alive. We met at a charity auction in downtown Seattle, and by the end of that evening, I was already halfway in love. He was the type of man who remembered little details, like how I took my coffee or the way I hated being interrupted mid-sentence. That kind of attentiveness can be blinding. Nathan's family was a different story. From the very beginning, his mother, Denise, made it clear I was not what she had pictured for her only son. She came from old money and held on to old ideas. To her, I was too ordinary. I worked in non-profit management, lived in a modest apartment, and did not have the kind of pedigree she flaunted at country clubs. Denise was always polite enough in front of Nathan, but the second he turned his back, her tone would shift. At first, I chalked it up to nerves. Maybe she just needed time to warm up to me. I kept telling myself that, even after the 5th family dinner, where I was referred to as Nathan's guest, rather than his fiancée. Still, I tried. I brought her flowers. I invited her to brunch. I even attended her book club once, which was more like a wine-fueled roast of anyone under the age of 40. I listened to her stories, complimented her antique silverware, and laughed at jokes that made me feel small. Nathan told me to be patient. "She is just old-fashioned," he said. "She will come around." I wanted to believe him. I loved him, and I thought love was enough. 3 months before our wedding, we began the final countdown. Venue visits, tastings, dress fittings. I was exhausted, but excited. This was supposed to be the happiest time of my life. Then one morning, I woke up to a flurry of Instagram stories. There they were, Denise, Nathan's sisters, his cousins, and even some of my own friends, gathered around a giant cake shaped like a diamond ring. Gold balloons spelled out bride-to-be. There were gift bags, champagne towers, and a handmade scrapbook of memories with the future Mrs. Grant. I sat up in bed, completely frozen. I had no idea this party was even happening. I scrolled through every photo, every story, looking for any mention of me. There was none, not even a text. At first, I thought it had to be a mistake. Maybe it was a surprise, and someone forgot to keep me in the loop. Maybe my invitation had been lost, but deep down, I knew. I knew exactly what it was. I called Nathan. He did not pick up. I texted 2 of my bridesmaids. One responded with a nervous, "Oh my God, you were not there." The other never answered. My stomach twisted. I felt foolish, humiliated, but mostly I felt furious. After everything I had tolerated, everything I had smiled through, this was the final slap. And the worst part? I could see Denise in one of the videos, raising a glass and saying, "This is what a real bride looks like." Something inside me snapped. I got dressed, carefully. I wore the same light blue dress I had worn on my first date with Nathan. I pulled my hair back, applied some makeup, and stared at myself in the mirror. My hands were shaking, but my eyes were dry. There were no more tears left, just fire. I drove across town to the hotel where the party was being held. I walked through the lobby, past the concierge who nodded politely, and stepped into the event hall. Conversations fell silent the moment I entered. Dozens of faces turned toward me in unison. Denise's expression did not change. She looked directly at me and raised her glass. "Well," she said, "look who finally decided to show up." One of Nathan's cousins muttered something under her breath, and a few others snickered. I looked around the room at the decorations, the gifts, the name tags that all said, Mrs. Grant. One by one, I locked eyes with people I had considered friends. None of them said a word. Then Denise stood up. She placed a manicured hand on my shoulder and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "We already have a better bride." My heart thudded once in my chest, but then, strangely, I smiled. I nodded. I turned around, and I walked straight out. By the time I got home, I knew what I had to do. I opened my laptop, logged into the wedding planning portal, and began unraveling everything. The venue? Cancelled. The DJ? Released. The photographer? Notified. I even called the officiant personally and told him I no longer required his services, but I saved the best for last, the caterer. I asked them to send a message to the client contact on file, stating, "The wedding for Claire Richardson and Nathan Grant has been cancelled. Please remove the date from your schedule." I made sure they used those exact words. I thought sending that message would bring me peace. For a few minutes, it did. I sat on my couch, watching the sun drop behind the buildings, thinking about how different things could have been. But peace is not what followed. It was chaos. 3 hours after the caterer sent the cancellation, Nathan finally called. I ignored it. He called again and again. By the 5th attempt, he left a voicemail. His voice was sharp, no longer the calm, thoughtful man I had fallen in love with. He said he had no idea I had not been invited, that it was all a misunderstanding, that his mother handled everything and he had trusted her judgment. He begged me to talk, to meet, to fix things. I stared at my phone and felt a strange mix of rage and relief. He had chosen to stay silent when it mattered. Now that the damage was done, he wanted to patch it up like it was a scratch on a wall. The next morning, I received a text from a blocked number. It was a photo of Nathan, shirtless, in what was clearly not our apartment. The background showed a woman's vanity, a pink robe hanging from the bathroom door, and a golden retriever I had never seen before curled up by his feet. The message said, "This is the real bride. You were just the rehearsal." I sat there, stunned. The number was unfamiliar, but the message was unmistakable. Someone wanted me to know the truth, not just about the bridal shower, but about everything. I looked closer at the vanity. There was a bottle of perfume I recognized, Jo Malone Peony and Blush Suede. The same scent worn by Nathan's childhood friend, Marissa. The same Marissa who had cried when we got engaged, saying she was so happy for us, even as she hugged Nathan a little too tightly. My gut twisted. I had always suspected something was off between them, but Nathan had insisted they were just friends. Now I saw it clearly. He had been grooming a backup plan. I did not respond to the message. Instead, I did what any woman who had just been publicly humiliated, privately betrayed, and massively underestimated would do. I dressed up, went to our shared apartment, and walked in like I owned the place, because technically, I still did. My name was on the lease, and Nathan, who had apparently been staying elsewhere, had not expected me to return so soon. I started packing. Not my things, his. Every shirt, every cologne bottle, every golf club he had forced into the closet I paid for, all of it went into trash bags. I neatly labeled them Bride Upgrade Starter Kit and placed them outside the door. Then I called a locksmith. While I waited, I heard footsteps in the hallway. Nathan appeared, out of breath, his tie loose and eyes wild. He asked me what I was doing. I told him I was giving him a head start, since apparently his next chapter had already begun. He looked confused for a moment, and then his expression shifted, guilty, cornered. He asked how long I had known. I told him everything, about the text, the photo, the bridal shower, and the part where his mother called someone else a better bride. I expected him to deny it, to scramble, but instead he looked me in the eye and said, "I never wanted it to happen like this." I blinked. That was the moment I realized he had known. He had let it happen. He had watched me fight for a relationship he had already decided to abandon. And instead of ending things cleanly, he let me walk into betrayal like it was some kind of joke. His silence had not been weakness. It had been cruelty. I did not scream. I did not cry. I simply stepped aside and let the locksmith install the new lock. Nathan stood there, watching, his mouth moving but no words coming out. When it was done, I thanked the man, closed the door, and leaned against it. My hands were still, my heart somehow calmer than it had been in weeks. That evening, I received another message, this time from one of Nathan's aunts. She said she was so sorry about how things turned out. Then she added something that made my blood run cold. She wrote, "We all thought you knew. Denise told everyone you had stepped down so Marissa could take your place." Step down. That was how they had rewritten the story. Not that I had been pushed aside, humiliated, cheated on, and discarded, but that I had willingly made room for the better bride. It was not just a betrayal. It was a cover-up. A full-scale replacement of my identity in their lives. I was no longer Claire, the fiancée. I was Claire, the footnote. I knew then that I could not just walk away quietly. Some stories deserve an ending people remember. So I made a plan. The plan did not come to me all at once. It formed slowly, piece by piece, like shards of broken glass fitting together to make a mirror sharp enough to cut. I spent the next 2 days in silence, watching how the people who had once smiled in my face now pretended I had never existed. Nathan's social media was wiped clean of me. His cousins began posting photos with Marissa, calling her the one we always knew was right for him. My name was erased like a smudge on a window. Quick, quiet, and deliberate. They did not expect me to fight back. They thought I would disappear. So I decided to give them a reason to remember me. I began with the venue. It was a picturesque winery outside the city, rustic, charming. The kind of place that took bookings nearly a year in advance. I had originally paid the deposit from my own account because Nathan had forgotten his wallet at the time. That gave me full control over the reservation. I contacted the venue manager, explained the situation calmly, and asked for a full cancellation. Not only did I receive a refund, but she also mentioned that another couple had been desperately trying to book that same date. I smiled and told her to give it to them, free of charge. "Let someone else make real memories there," I said. Next was the florist. I had built a relationship with the owner, a kind woman named Gia, who had spent hours helping me design the arrangements. When I told her the wedding was cancelled, she sounded more upset than I expected. Then she hesitated and said something strange. "I just do not understand why your fiancé told us to switch the name on the order to Marissa Grant last week." That hit me harder than I let on. So Nathan had not just replaced me in his heart. He had been planning to replace me at the altar too. Quietly, strategically, as if I were an intern being phased out of a company merger. Every vendor I contacted had a similar story, changes being made behind my back, instructions coming from Denise or Nathan with the same excuse: the bride decided. I began to gather screenshots, emails, receipts, not because I wanted revenge, but because I wanted clarity. I needed to see just how deep the deception went. And with each layer I uncovered, I found another person who had chosen not to speak up. A bridesmaid who felt weird about everything, but did not want to cause drama. A cousin who thought it was just a family thing. Even my own friend Lisa, who had helped plan the bridal shower, admitted she was pressured by Denise to exclude me. She told me she was sorry, that she had tried to convince them to tell me, but eventually gave in. She had folded under the weight of rich smiles and passive-aggressive manipulation. But the final twist came from the one person I had almost forgotten, Nathan's father. He reached out unexpectedly, an email that arrived at 2:13 a.m. He had always been the quiet one in the family, overshadowed by Denise's presence and Nathan's charisma, but now he said he needed to tell me something important. We met the next day at a small diner far from their usual social circles. He wore a baseball cap and kept glancing over his shoulder like he was being watched. He said the engagement had never been about love for Denise. It had been about legacy, their family name, their business ties, appearances. "Claire," he said, "you were never part of the equation. You were the variable." And once Denise realized she could convince Marissa to play along, someone she had known since childhood, someone she could control, she began to steer Nathan away from you. I asked him if Nathan truly loved me. He sighed. "At first, yes, but when your mother got sick and you started missing events, staying home more, Denise used that to twist things. She said you were unstable, that you were falling apart, and Nathan, he stopped defending you. That was the wound that hurt the most. Not that they betrayed me, but that when I needed him, Nathan let them rewrite the truth. He had loved me when I was easy to love." The moment I became inconvenient, he let them build a new story without me in it. I thanked his father and left. I did not cry. I did not scream. I just went home and sent one final message to the caterer. The new bride might still want her big day, I typed. But make sure the cake says, "Congrats to the second choice." That was not even the real twist. 2 days later, I received a panicked voicemail from Denise herself. Her voice was shaking. She said the venue was gone. The florist had refused to return calls, and the caterer had sent an email with some kind of joke message. They were now refusing to change. She demanded I call her back immediately to undo the damage. I did not. Instead, I posted a single photo on my social media, me standing in front of the now booked venue, holding a sign that said, "Closed for truth." No caption, no hashtags, just the image. It exploded. Within hours, people were tagging Nathan and Marissa, asking questions, digging through old posts. Someone even leaked the bridal shower footage, where Denise had made her now infamous "better bride" comment. It went viral. I watched it all unfold, not with satisfaction, but with quiet clarity. I had not ruined anything. I had simply returned what they gave me: empty chairs, silent betrayal, and the opportunity to smile through it all. The aftermath unfolded like a wildfire. What began as quiet humiliation turned into a public storm that none of them were prepared for. The video from the bridal shower, where Denise raised her glass and said, "We already have a better bride," had been reshared across platforms. People began commenting, asking if it was real, tagging news outlets, even creating side-by-side comparisons of me and Marissa. It became more than gossip. It became a conversation about family control, classism, and manipulation. Nathan tried to do damage control. He posted a vague apology on his page, something about unfortunate misunderstandings and respect for all parties involved. The comments section quickly turned against him. People were not buying it. Then, 3 days later, he went silent. That silence, however, did not last. I received an email from Marissa. I expected anger, denial, maybe even a half-hearted defense of her actions. Instead, what she sent me changed everything. It was a screenshot of text messages between her and Denise. Long threads of instructions, demands, and guilt trips. Denise had orchestrated everything: what Marissa should wear, what vendors to speak with, how to convince Nathan to phase Claire out. But there was one message that stood out from the rest. It said, "You are doing this for the family. Claire is unstable. You know what happened to her mother." I stared at that sentence for a long time. My mother had passed away 6 months before the bridal shower. It was cancer. Slow, brutal, and private. Only a few people knew how hard it had been for me, how I had taken time off work to care for her, how I stopped going out, how I sometimes cried myself to sleep from the weight of it all. And yet, Denise had weaponized it. She had used my grief to brand me as weak, as unworthy of marrying her son. That was the story she had sold to everyone. Marissa's message continued. She said she had gone along with it at first because she had been in love with Nathan for years. But once she saw how far it had gone, how cruel it had become, she began to feel sick. She wrote, "I know you hate me. You should. But I am not proud of what I became. I wanted him, but not like this. I never wanted to erase you." I should have hated her, and a part of me did. But what surprised me most was the pity I felt. She had been Denise's puppet, just like Nathan had. Controlled, manipulated, shaped into what that woman believed a perfect wife should be. And that was when it hit me. None of this had really been about me. Not the bridal shower, not the lies, not even the wedding. It had all been about Denise's image, her pride, her delusion that she could mold the people around her like clay, forcing them into roles she had written before any of us had arrived. Nathan was the golden boy who could do no wrong. Marissa was the backup doll she had kept on a shelf for years. And I had simply been the mistake she tried to edit out of the family photo. But I was no longer playing that role. I gathered everything, screenshots, emails, voice memos, and forwarded them to a reporter who had reached out earlier in the week. I made it clear I was not interested in a dramatic exposé or a pity story. I just wanted the truth out there, because silence had been their weapon for too long. and I refused to give it to them anymore. The article published the next morning. It was titled, "Bride Replaced, a story of silence, status, and standing up." It did not mention my full name, but it included quotes from vendors, excerpts from texts, and even a still from the viral bridal shower video. The story exploded. By noon, Denise's name was trending. Nathan's father contacted me again. He told me Denise had locked herself in their study, refusing to speak to anyone. Nathan had left the city for a break, and Marissa had returned to her apartment, staying quiet but away from the family altogether. Everything they had tried to bury had surfaced, piece by piece, until the polished mask cracked completely. But the biggest twist came that evening. I received a message from one of the wedding guests, someone I barely remembered, a man named Eric, who had been on Nathan's side of the guest list. He told me something that left me breathless. At the bridal shower, before I arrived, Denise had made a toast. It was not just the one that went viral. There was another, recorded on a phone that never made it to the internet. In it, she said, "The best part is, she has no idea. She thinks she is still the bride. Let her find out like the rest of them, too late to matter." They had planned to keep me in the dark until the very last second. They were going to go through with the wedding, just without me. I had been the insurance policy in case Marissa backed out, a placeholder, a ghost bride. But I had flipped the script, and I was not done yet. In the days that followed, I watched their world unravel from a distance. What they had built on manipulation, arrogance, and deception crumbled under the weight of the truth. The Grant family's name was suddenly associated with something much less glamorous than wealth and legacy. People began sharing their own stories, former employees who had been fired unfairly, neighbors who remembered Denise's controlling behavior, even old acquaintances who admitted they had always seen glimpses of what was now public. Nathan resurfaced 3 days after the article dropped. He texted me, but not to apologize. Instead, he accused me of humiliating his family, of destroying his reputation, and of acting emotionally unstable. He actually used those words, as if the woman who had been excluded from her own bridal shower, quietly replaced, and publicly mocked, should have swallowed it all and smiled through it. That message told me everything I needed to know. He had learned nothing. I did not reply. There was nothing left to say. But life has a strange way of delivering the final blow when you least expect it. 2 weeks later, I received a letter in the mail. It was from Denise's personal assistant, a young woman named Mallory, who I had met briefly during one of the wedding planning sessions. She had always been quiet, often scribbling notes while Denise gave orders. I had thought of her as just another silent participant, someone who did not want to get involved. But her letter proved otherwise. She wrote that she had quit her job the day after the article was published. She said she could no longer support a woman who could look another human being in the eye and see only a threat to control. She also said she had something for me, something she believed I deserved to see. Enclosed was a flash drive. I plugged it into my laptop with shaking hands. There were several folders. One held surveillance footage from inside the bridal shower, recorded from the hotel's security system. In one clip, Denise can be seen whispering to Marissa right before making the toast. She says, clearly and without hesitation, "She will come. I hope she does. It will be good for her to see how quickly she can be replaced." The room had laughed. Another folder held voice recordings, private conversations between Denise and Nathan. One in particular hit me like a punch to the chest. Nathan, sounding uncertain, asks, "Do you really think we can just pretend she was never part of this?" Denise's response, "Of course. That is how power works, Nathan. You control the story. You control the memory." They had planned it all, step by step, as if I were a stain they could scrub away. I sat there for hours, listening, watching, feeling the weight of every moment I had once second-guessed myself. Every time I had felt like maybe I was overreacting, every time Nathan had told me to be patient, to give them grace, all of it had been part of a bigger game I never agreed to play. But now I had the final move. I uploaded the files anonymously to the same reporter who had broken the original story. Within hours, a follow-up article dropped. The bride they tried to erase. New evidence confirms orchestrated betrayal. The public turned completely. Even the people who had defended Nathan or questioned my story before began to understand the full scope of what had happened. This was not just a broken engagement. This was premeditated emotional sabotage. I did not speak publicly. I did not issue a statement. I let the evidence speak for me. And then, something unexpected happened. I was contacted by a national talk show. They wanted me to appear on an episode about resilience and rising above betrayal. I declined the invitation, but they asked if they could read a quote from me. I gave them one. I was not the woman they imagined for their son, but I am the woman who walked away with her dignity intact. That is more powerful than any title they could have given me. They read it on air, and that was the moment I felt something I had not felt in months. Peace. As for Nathan, last I heard, he lost his job after the company's board decided his involvement in the scandal made him a liability. Marissa moved to another city and deleted all her accounts. Denise went quiet. The country club events stopped. The socialite photos disappeared. The empire she tried to control slipped out of her hands without a single scream. And me? I started over. I moved to Portland, took a new job with a nonprofit that supports women recovering from psychological abuse and coercive control. It felt like purpose, real purpose. I still have my wedding dress in the closet, not because I regret anything, but because it reminds me of what I escaped. I sometimes take it out and look at it, not with sadness, but with pride. Because the woman who bought that dress thought she was walking into a marriage. Instead, she walked into a war, and she walked out of it stronger. This was never a story about losing love. It was about finding myself again. If you enjoyed this story and want more powerful twists and real-feeling drama, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Your support means everything.